Sivi is still a pretty avid football player. How do you find time outside of your practice to engage in these hobbies?
Right, sometimes you just have to let the client know, I'm sorry, but I have a life.
What made you change your mind and pivot to law?
This is quite interesting area actually. It's got more impact, I feel.
What advice would you give to lawyers who might be struggling?
Every occupation has an element of stress. It's important that you have other things to do outside your work.
If you had to give one piece of advice to the next generation of junior lawyers, what would you say to them?
Don't feel that when you make a mistake, it's the end of the world.
Hi everyone, welcome to Dentons Rodyk on Air. This is a podcast where we speak to lawyers and discuss a little bit more about their professional and personal journey. Hi Sivi, welcome on to the podcast.
Thank you.
Maybe we would start off with just an introduction about yourself.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Sivi. I'm a partner in the firm here. I've been here since 1986. I feel like I'm part of the furniture. Been around and seen many good friends come and join in the firm. Some have left but still remain good friends. I was born in Singapore and school here. I did all my schooling here except maybe 6 months of kindergarten in the UK. But otherwise, everything has been here. Went to Newton Boys School, primary 1 and 2, no longer exists. I was then in ACS all the way until O levels. Then I went to NJC, and then law school. And before law school, of course, Army, National Service. And then after law school, graduated, joined Rodyk at that time. I did my MBA whilst working, finished that, and then enough studying for a while, avoided exams, and then enjoyed practice.
Essentially, we've asked Sivi to bring along an item, something of your personal favorite, and to share with us.
As you can see from my t-shirt, I'm a big Liverpool supporter, right? Since I was 12 years old, I've been supporting Liverpool. In terms of music, one of my favorite groups, if not the favorite, is the Beatles. Some of you might be too young to know who they are, but the Beatles are very popular and they had the records and everything. This was before the days of YouTube and social media. So this thing, and I love making Lego, of course. So this encapsulates everything because this is the Yellow Submarine. It's a song and also a short movie by the Beatles. And the Beatles come from Liverpool. And this is a Lego model. So it's got all three things in there. I do make a lot of Lego, and actually this pastime sort of really got kicking during COVID. So when I was at home, bored, and my wife was saying, you're spending too much time doing work, you're not relaxing. So I started making Lego. Keeps me sane. It's a good way to de-stress.
I think it's really cool that you have brought an item that kind of links all your hobbies all into one.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you're also a fan of football,
Yeah.
Liverpool to be exact.
Yeah.
Would you say having interests outside of law allows you to have a balanced life in that sense?
Definitely. You cannot, I believe you cannot always just have one thing and your work is all, it is not. Right? Your work, your family, your health, and other interests must all be balanced properly. Right? And you need this because sometimes when work is so stressful and terrible, you need to have other things to balance it out and keep you happy. I guess when Liverpool lose and I'm so upset, and then I come back and do my work and I focus on work and I kind of forget it for a while.
Sometimes law might be a distraction for you from football, and football might be a distraction for you from law.
Yep,
It works both ways.
Sometimes, yeah.
Maybe bringing you back to the beginning years before you entered practice. You did mention that you were once at a crossroads of choosing between law and other professions.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of students do have to make these difficult decisions. You studied sciences and you considered becoming a doctor. What made you change your mind and pivot to law? Because these are two very different areas.
Yeah, so it's true. I did do science in my JC days. I did the pure science, physics, chem, bio, and maths. Very tough. I didn't score very high on my subjects. Applied to do medicine, and at that time, I think I was short by 1 point for the medicine cutoff. I could have appealed, and maybe tried my luck again, but
Yeah.
instead I got a place in science as my second choice. Then I went into NS. And in NS, I started talking to people. An uncle who was a lawyer. I have the ladies who were in junior college with me were all now in university. Some were doing law, so I started talking to them, and I said, "What's law all about?" And the more I heard about it and I started reading up, I realized this is quite interesting area actually. It's got more impact, I feel. Whereas with science, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Reapplied to NUS for law, and one thing led to another. I went for the interview, got accepted, and that was it. And I never looked back since then.
Do you think that now, as a practicing lawyer, there are aspects of law that has some parallels to the science background that you come from?
When I was in law school, I was told, and many people used to say that the students who come from the humanities background, the arts, all, have an advantage over those who don't, because there's a lot of reading
Yes.
in law. I didn't think about it, so I just did my stuff. But years later, when I finished and I started practicing, I realized actually that if you come from a science background, it is quite beneficial when you do law. The reason is that you have principles and rules in the science, and then you apply these to everyday situations, right? Whether it's a math situation or a physics formula or whatever. With law, it's very similar. You have statutes, you have principles of law, rules, decisions, and then you have a scenario before you where you need to apply it.
Yes.
And does it fall squarely within the principles? Does it fall out? Can you distinguish it? So in that sense, I found that the discipline in the science subjects training helped me to analyze and approach this. Not to say that those who come from humanities are not as good analyzing it, but I think when you're in the humanities and when you look at a problem like this, the advantage you have is that you actually look at it in a more humane perspective. Right? Those from science tend to be very clinical, cut and thrust and cold. Right? Whereas the humanities, when you read literature and arts and poetry, you get more in touch with your feelings. So when you're doing a law matter, and I guess when you're approaching a subject, you're actually looking at the humane aspect of it, which is very important as well when you deal with clients, right? At the end of the day, we're all dealing with human beings.
You were mentioning about, the blend between being more analytical and also having an emotional touch, a more humane touch to law. As a senior lawyer, if you were approached by a student who is deciding between whether he or she should go into law school, whether this is, the path that he or she should pursue, what are the traits that you would narrow it down to and kind of guide this student as to deciding whether he or she should pursue law?
Yeah. So I've been asked this question by my nephews, family, friends, 10, 15 occasions.
Too many occasions.
Too many. But, I look at the individual and I ask them, I said, what is it that you look for? Right? Because law, yes, I can tell you about the study of law, and then there's also the practice of law, which can be quite different. So I said the study of law, you need to have this analytical skills, you need to be reading a lot. It's hard work. Exams are tough, not easy, and it's not just a matter of reading and then simply writing down what you read. You really need to analyze, distinguish, and go through the whole analytical process to answering a law question. And that's just the study of law. When you come into practice, then you got all these other things coming where you have real life scenarios where you're dealing with people or companies, and the wrong advice leads to serious consequences. And that's the big step from studying law to practicing law, because now people are relying on your advice. So I tell them, I said, are you that kind of character where if somebody comes to you for advice, I mean, friends talk to each other.
Yes.
And they say, oh, should I go out with this girl? Should I eat this? And that's simple advice. But if it's something very serious where someone's relying on you, do you have that strength of character to be confident, to be careful, to look at the other person and consider that person's situation, feelings, and how you would then advise that person? It's a good discipline to study law, because what you will pick up, the skills and learning, is very important, and it cuts across a lot of areas, right? What you practice in law is a very marketable degree. You can go into business, you can go into hospitality, other things, because a lot of it will apply, leading contracts, documents. Really, the important thing is, do you feel that you have that character to, first of all, be of high integrity, someone whom people can trust and rely on, because that's what it's all about, right? If you're an untrustworthy lawyer, you're not a good lawyer, you can forget it. Of course, you make mistakes, and you're not right all the time. That's a given. But in trying to be genuine and sincere in wanting to do this, are you that kind of person? You feel that, I'm not sure I have that kind of strength within me to advise people, then think about it carefully. I don't know whether it helps the youngsters who ask me this question or whether it makes it worse for them.
Well, maybe I could, as a youngster myself, follow up to that. So you mentioned about the practice of law is quite different from the study of law. So maybe, okay, let's assume that our students coming out of law school would like to practice law and become a lawyer. As you are practicing law, you mentioned you need to have the confidence to be able to give your clients, advice and to be trustworthy. How do you become a lawyer who is confident in their ability?
What I tell young lawyers to be when they join us as trainees or interns, I tell them that, your friends will normally tell you that lawyers are good at arguing. Right? In fact, your family all tell you you're a lawyer, that's why you argue. My father used to tell me that whenever we have discussions, you're always arguing. To me, actually, what's more important for a good lawyer is to be a good listener. Right? Not a good person who argues, but listen carefully to what is being said. Listen to how it's being said and who is saying it. Whether there's an emotion behind it, whether there's another meaning behind what's being said. Because sometimes we ignore that. We want to go straight to the solution. Be a good listener so that you understand what is being said, how it is being said, who is saying it, and maybe even why it's being said in a certain way. These are important when you take instructions from clients. And it's not something you might know immediately. It comes with experience. It comes with talking to not just your clients, but your family, your friends, your staff members. And as they talk to you, you realize who maybe doesn't want to share so much with you, who is more comfortable with you, more open. And generally, clients don't tell you the whole story. They only tell you the good things that they feel is in their favor. The things which are not in their favor, you'll never find out until much later. Right? That's something you must, because you got to keep telling the client, please tell me what went wrong, what did you make a mistake here and there, that kind of thing. So I tell my young lawyers, be a good listener. Secondly, the thing about confidence comes about with practice, with experience. How do you build it up? Look at your seniors, how they behave, how they handle matters, how hard they work, how much they check details before they send out something. It's important. Don't feel rushed, right? Right now, with compared to when I started practicing, nowadays you have WhatsApp, SMS, you have emails, everything goes out so fast. I get very worried sometimes when my lawyers respond very quickly to clients. And, in the old days, we had time to think before we type a fax or a letter, when you're writing it out.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really long ago. So we used to
Haven't heard
write
that.
it out, handwrite my draft, give it to my second. Then she'll come back with the letter, then I read it. I say, no, actually. So I would have spent maybe 20, 30 minutes, right, preparing a response, unless it's a detailed legal opinion. But nowadays, you do it in like 5 minutes or 3 minutes, a reply, then it goes off. So I tell them, you can take the time. Even if client is chasing you, you don't feel that stress. I mean, if it's a simple answer, yes, go ahead and answer. But if it's something that requires a bit of thought, take that additional time, think about it, check with your senior. Even if you send your senior a draft and the senior makes a lot of changes, it's a learning experience. Do not feel that you're being belittled or that you did a bad job, or that you're a failure. It's all a learning experience, right? Even at my age now, after all these years, I learn a lot from my younger lawyers and my colleagues when they explain things to me about modern technology, which I don't understand. But it's a learning experience when you start off practice. So you must have that fortitude. You must be a bit thick-skinned, but you must know that you're doing it because you want to learn and be a good lawyer. And it's the same in any profession, I think.
You mentioned about reading between the lines when you are communicating
Yeah.
with a client, and it comes with experience. I guess that's not something that we pick up right off the bat. But I think it's very interesting because as a trainee, when I sit in on calls, I'm always listening to the kind of questions that the senior lawyers will ask the client. And I realize it's kind of like a reverse, like you're trying to reverse engineer to understand what are the other facts. And you have to trace it from the back.
That's right.
And to see if you're missing out on any blind spots.
Correct. You bring the client back to where it all began. Because the
Yes.
client normally thinks, I'm going to tell you now what's happening.
Yeah.
This is the problem I had. They didn't pay me. They didn't do this. And you're like, okay, what exactly was it all about? Why wouldn't they pay you? Then slowly you find the core, right?
As a trainee, it's quite difficult to grasp that. Like, how do we come up with these questions to ask the clients? Because it's like, you don't know what you don't know. So I think it's really something that comes from experience.
And listening to your seniors. So you need to sit in at calls, meetings like this, and then you gradually, pick up that skill.
I think that's a unique take on lawyers because, like you mentioned, we all hear lawyers, they
And
make good
arguing.
arguments. You think about like the movies and how they're just really good at making their point.
Yeah.
But we don't see the other side of it, which is actually lawyers have to be good listeners, like you said. This is a question that I actually received from a prospective law student, and he asked me, doesn't that come with a lot of stress? The stress of being liable for what you say because you are a lawyer and you have all these obligations and responsibilities that factor into your everyday work.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that immense responsibility?
Whoever asks you this question has to bear in mind, we are not the sole exclusive profession that has liability. Everyone, every job, right? Whether you're a doctor, an accountant, you're a teacher, you've got all these kids relying on you to teach them the right things, right? If you teach them the wrong things, you're liable for some other way. So every occupation comes with a sense of responsibility, and of course, if things go wrong, there's a liability attached to it. So in that sense, every occupation has stress, right? The question is, how do you manage this so that you reduce the stress? How do you cope with it? And the only way is to do your job properly by learning, by picking up skills, learning from your seniors, and learning from your mistakes. You will always make mistakes, right? It's a matter of how bad those mistakes are and whether you repeat them despite telling you not to do it, or whether you learn from it and then you improve the next time. When you start an occupation, you shouldn't think about the liability and the stress. You should really think about what I can do to be good at it, right? If you're more positive and you think, I want to do, how can I be good at it? Oh, I got to listen, I got to look at my seniors, I got to read up, I got to practice. Then that kind of takes you on the right path. Because if you are going to worry about the stress and all the fact you're going to be sued, you'll be so cautious and you'll be so introspective at everything. You dare not take risks. You dare not. Your confidence level is going to be very low. I mean, I give you a very simple analogy. Okay, I like to play football, right? But my dad, being a doctor, always used to warn my brothers and I, hey, be careful when you play. You fall down, you break a bone. In the hospital, I see people coming with all these injuries. So I used to tell my dad, if I listen to you and take all your advice, I'm not going to get out of the house. Because you tell me all the dangers that are out there, right? Even playing football, I said, then do I not kick the ball? Do I not tackle? But I said, no, I want to enjoy my football and play well. So I will just go out and play. Did I get injured? Of course I did, right? I've had 3 operations on my leg, all broken, this and that. But I still come back, I enjoy it, and that's how it is.
There are risks and, risk involved in everything. But, you got to live life.
You got to live life so that when you reach like my age or even older, you want to look back and you say, I'm glad I did these things.
Yeah, maybe on the topic of football, just for our viewers' knowledge, Sivi is still a pretty avid football player and he's very involved. Even till now, you're in your 60s?
I'm past 60 now. I'm 63.
63, yeah. And Sivi was part of the corporate team that won our football challenge at Dentons.
Well, I got to thank all the younger players who were in the team. I was just the old uncle playing and here and there. But I enjoy football. I still play once a week with my regular guys. And I play on 6, 7 aside. 11 aside is a bit taxing for me, but it's good fun to be out. I take a bit more precaution now when I play. I don't go in for tackles and all that, but yeah, I just enjoy it. I used to be very competitive on the pitch when I was fitter and younger. So I'll be shouting orders, and those who played with me years will know that I was quite a terror on the pitch, like, in terms of pushing the team. But now I'm sort of a bit more
Mellowed
calmer,
down.
mellowed down. I'm more encouraging now to my teammates on the pitch, which is a change. But even they say, "Wow, it's fine."
How do you find time outside of your practice to engage in these hobbies? Practice can be really tiring sometimes. You could be really busy working through the weekends. How did you manage to find time to keep this hobby alive?
After hours and weekends would be the main time that when I was an associate. Because you're right, when you're an associate, during the office hours, you're quite busy. You don't have time for much thing. But the moment you can leave office at 6 o'clock, so I'll go and play badminton. Or if I can find enough guys on my way home, I used to play at Bishan Park, and my house was nearby. And that time we used to SMS each other. There wasn't WhatsApp. So a few of guys will say, "Guys, shall we play this evening?" And if we get 8, the minimum 8, so we can play 4 aside, we'll go. So in my car, I would have my boots. I'll have a football and a spare football attire. So if it's on, I'll finish at 6. I'll speed down. Okay, I'll drive a bit fast to Bishan Park, and then the guys over there and we'll play. Right? So I can do that twice a week after work. Right? And then I'll go back. And then if there's work to be done after that, I can try and do a bit of work. But those were the days when we didn't have so much emails and internet and all that. So there was very little work after hours. Right? It was mainly done in the office. If you had a project you're working on, you stay in the office and you do it. Then you go back at 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it is. But the moment you go home, there's really no work you can do. There weren't WhatsApp and your mobile smartphones and all that. And then on weekends, it was generally calmer. But if you had to work, you work in the office. So generally, you had time to do these things, to exercise, to do your hobbies, to spend time with your family and all that. And that was important. I'm glad I had partners who I worked under who also didn't demand that you must be there all the time. And they were able to manage clients' expectations as well. And not be a slave to the clients. That's a very important thing, right? I mean, you work with the clients, you're doing a matter, but it doesn't mean that the client is always telling you, "I want this, I want that," and all that. You've got to balance that out as well.
I do realize that a lot of the associates, we constantly get updates from clients. So maybe because of that, the pace is faster. It creates the issue of, how do we balance life and work? What advice would you give regarding that?
You're right, the pace is faster, the expectations are higher. So clients themselves know that they can reach you any time of the day, anywhere in the world. They expect you to respond, although some clients pretend to be nice and understanding. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you on your holiday." But that's about it.
But
Can
you
you
did.
still reply? So the question is how you deal with this. Now, if you're really busy with something else, you're traveling or you're up in a mountain or other, don't answer. Right? Sometimes you just have to let the client know, "I'm sorry, but I have a life. When I'm in the office, when I'm at the house, I will do your work." Right? If I can go the extra mile when I'm on leave or I will do it. But if I can't, what I normally do is I tell the client, "Can I come back to you the day after?" Or so, or "Can I get my colleague to reply to you?" If you feel that you are able to handle it and reply to the client, don't rush. But if you have the ability to reply even in the evening when you're having dinner or something, by all means, a simple reply would do. I wouldn't spend so much time going there unless it's really urgent, something you're aware of, and the client has put you on notice that I might need you to be on standby this weekend. We're terminating someone. It's a very important, matter. It could be contentious. Can you be on standby to advise? At least mentally, you're prepared for it. It's like for the guys when you're in national service and when you finish, you can get mobilized very quickly. Right? You can happily watching a game, and of course that's when they pick the best time to mobilize you. It's something like that, but you can manage it. Right? And if you really can't because you're busy or doing something, tell the client, that you can't at that point in time, but you will respond eventually. maybe a few hours later, maybe the next day, or get a colleague to reply. But you see, at the end of the day, when you tell the client when it's finished, I'm now going to bill you, and you remember when you called me that Sunday and in the middle of something, all this is additional time outside normal office hours. So my billing rate actually should be higher, should be different. The client said, no, it was a small, short call, it was a 5-minute call. How do you justify this, and how does the client appreciate all this? So sometimes I push back because, and I guess as being senior, I can push back some clients to tell them, if you want us to do it now over the weekend, I'll get my team on standby, but the rate will be different. Then they will like, oh, okay, well, how much more will it cost? And I'll tell them, well, this is how much it will cost. Is it really that urgent that you want it now? And we're happy to respond. But if you can wait till Monday, then fine. And then the client generally will say, okay, can wait till Monday. So sometimes it's a way of saying no, but it's also to educate the clients that when they want urgent things, when they want rush things, there is a consequence. Right? Either you're not able to do it because you're not there, or there's a higher cost element to it. And the client must appreciate that. Because the client will do the same thing to its customers. Right? We all work for clients who do business. And if they are dealing with their own customer companies, oh, I want it urgent, I want this now and done. These guys probably charge extra, or they say can't be done. So why can't we do the same to our clients?
I think that's very interesting because I don't think I've heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense because especially in private practice, it's a service industry.
Yeah.
Likewise, there are, I guess, additional charges that you can, factor in to advise such that demand and supply is managed well.
Yes, we all want to please our clients. We want to provide the best service we can do, but there are limitations. And you need to know those boundaries and those parameters for your own sanity. Otherwise, you're already putting yourself under a lot of pressure. And when you do that, you put the others around you under pressure. And what I mean by that is, they may not be your colleagues you're putting under pressure, it may be your family. Because when you're so stressed and you go home and your parents or your siblings or your wife ask you a question, you're already in such a stressed, bad mood, you take it out on them. Right? And they don't deserve that actually. So, it's how you manage that actually.
In your position as a senior partner now, what is the most difficult or challenging part of your role? I'm sure it would differ from being an associate and senior associate along the way. And maybe we've just seen one example, which is, as a senior partner, you have to manage the expectations of clients as well as the workload of your team.
The other thing for senior partners is, of course, to get the business.
Yes.
Right? That's a big part of our thing. So from being associate as you grow up in the practice, your role slowly morphs into being the actual guy doing the job, the drafting, the research, to now finding the work, the business development aspect of practice, and building a good reputation with clients so that the clients come back to you for more work, or they recommend you to their friends or their colleagues or others. That's how you build it up. And the reason I need to also get the work out there is to see my team working on these matters, learning, being kept busy. The other aspect I feel as a senior partner with a team is to try and get the best out of my team. Right? I want them to grow to be good lawyers, good people. Right? So they understand this, the practice of law, but how are they managing, like what you mentioned, all these things, stress, how they're managing clients. I want to see how they manage that, because the time will come soon where I will retire, and I want them to be able to carry on in their own style. They don't have to follow what I do. My style is something which I do. It may not be the best style, it may not be suitable for everyone. So they have to find their own way of doing things, their own style. But there are certain core values that hopefully they've learned along the way that brings them up.
So it sounds like there's 2 points. First is the business aspect of being a senior partner. And the other point, which is, providing mentorship for your team, so that I guess it's kind of like building a legacy,
that's a good word, mentorship.
Mentorship.
Yeah.
Something that will guide the future lawyers throughout the rest of their career. Increasingly, there are a lot of lawyers who, see this path and decide perhaps, maybe I'm not cut out for it. Maybe I don't enjoy the business side, or, of being a partner, and I don't want to take this path. Maybe I like the substantive work that I do, and I like doing the work, but not the other side. But as you mentioned in private practice, right, I think these two kind of come together if you want to go down the path of being a partner. So what do you have to say to, let's say, young lawyers who think that this is not the path for them? Are there other paths, or should they reconsider?
If they want to remain in law?
If they want to remain in law.
I mean, the options would be, depending on the firm you're in, you can always say, I don't want to be a partner, I'm happy to be a senior associate, for example. And with that, then you do your work, your salary is, at that level, you don't go into partnership. And some firms might accept it. Or you go in-house, become a general counsel. And again, that's, I'm not putting it down, it's a good job. It's got its own expectations, own pressures being in-house. Or you can even go into academia and teach. You've got the experience of working and applying all that we learn in school to the real life practice. And that's why I say there's a difference between the study of law and the practice of law. If you recall, in law school, there were some subjects that were taught by practitioners, and they would tend to have a different approach to these subjects, right? The academics would come with all the case law, the subject, but the practitioners come in straight away, they just go into the thing, right? Without so much the details and which case said, they're just saying, look, this is what's happening. Okay, yes, a case may have said this, but in real life, this is what's happening, or there's a difference in it. So that's a possibility for the
practitioners have a different angle when they approach an issue as compared to, let's say, academics. Would you say when you are providing advice to your clients, do you also have to incorporate practical business advice on top of legal advice?
Always. If I were to reply to my client, let's say in writing, and tell him, well, section 7 says this and this is, and I copy the whole thing, and this case said all that, the client's going to look at me, and you must remember these are not legally trained generally, right? They're business people, they're lay people, and they look at it and they say, this is exactly what I'm worried about when lawyers throw me all this jargon and the henceforth, hereforth, all these things, and section. What does it mean? Right? Can you put it in layman's English? Very common, you get that reply, right? So when I'm asked the advice, yes, I will get my team to do the groundwork, do the research, and then we have a discussion. And then they will prepare the draft, and I have a look at it and say, yes, this is a good draft for a client to read and understand the issue, appreciate the issue, and what the options are. That is how you have to approach it. Not throw the legal jargon and the law. The client says, the law, I leave it to you. You know it, but you need to tell me now what it means, what my options are, there solutions, am I going to get into trouble? That kind of thing.
The best lawyers are probably not the ones who can, list all the statutes and give you all the legally correct answer, but someone who can break down that very complex concept and explain it to you in a very simple way.
Terms, and very practical and meaningful. And then, of course, if the client says, but why do you say this? Why can't I do that? And once you go into details, then you share the law. Then you say, well, there's this statute section which says this. This is the interpretation that's been given. And then the client appreciate, okay, now I know where you're coming from. We have clients who, when they hear your advice, they say, okay, I understand, but can you educate me on what the section says, what the statute, the Companies Act says, or what the case law is saying? Then at least, they want to be better informed.
So I guess there are different clients who prefer different forms of, explanation. Some might just want a straightforward answer in a certain situation. Well, I guess it's a skill then to learn how to communicate with clients.
It is. You pick it up over the years.
Then maybe now let's move on to your area of expertise. You practice the law in the area of, let's say, venture capital, but, amongst the many things. You deal a lot with startups. Have you ever, looked at a startup idea and go, this is impossible, this is not going to work out?
Appreciate listening to the founders because they are so excited and enthusiastic about what they have. And sometimes they come to us hoping that we can connect them to investors. Sometimes they come to us because they want legal advice about how they pitch for their work. What they should look out for in terms of protecting their interests, their rights to the company, and all that. And before I get into detail, I said, can you please tell me what is it you do? What is your app all about? What is your discovery and what you do? So when they tell me that, I said, and why is that? They said, we're trying to fill this gap. Fintech,
Okay.
right? For example, payment gateways and all these things. So I used to learn all these things from them. How we make payment faster, and people can transfer money without going through banks. They save on commissions and bank charges. I said, oh, that's very good. It makes sense, practical value. Others have come and I've looked at it and I said, at which stage are you at? If it's just an idea you have and you're toying with it, fine. But have you tested it? Is there proof of concept? If you haven't got it tested and it's just your enthusiasm, you're not going to go far. All right. An investor talking to you, not the lawyer, will have very specific questions to ask. Does it really work or not? Or is it just something you have? Because if it doesn't work, go and please test it, make sure it works, then you come back to us. So I've never told any founder that I don't think it's going to work. Rather, I've told them, I don't think you're ready yet. You need to go and do more work. You need to test it, or you need to check it out with your competitors who are doing the same thing and find out whether yours is really a better version, whether you're adding something different to the market.
It sounds like you are also providing a business aspect to your feedback to your clients.
And very related, and they're not just business. The other thing I tell, so if they're let's say 2 or 3 founders or 4, they might be good friends, right? So we have this famous thing where people are good friends and they worked together in the same company, and then they came together to form their own startup. So they then say, "Oh, we want to do this." I say, "Guys, have you all looked at your own arrangements and had a partnership agreement? Do you have your own shareholder agreement amongst yourselves?" And they look at me, "Why do we need that?" I said, "Well, today you all are good friends, and you're driving the business and you're trying to find investors, you're hungry and all that. There will come a time when you got the money and you're now at the next level of investment or your development or your product, your sales are going so well and you're earning money and all that. There will come a time when you then ask each other, are you really pulling your weight? Are you really doing enough? Because you've done your part, the product is there, you're not coming up with new developments, we're not just earning money. Do you actually, deserve that much? I said that's one aspect. Secondly, I said is along the way when you all get married, have children, the family aspect comes in, and sometimes it's your spouses, your family members who are putting this doubt in your mind, right? Saying that your partner isn't working so hard. How come you are the one spending the long hours doing the research? Whereas he's gone to play golf, he's going holiday. I said this is a very real thing I've seen happen.
It's very common.
It's very common. It happens. That jealousy, the envy, all
Wow.
that. Not caused by the three good friends, for example,
Yep.
but by others who come into their lives.
Oh.
And another aspect is when you find investors come in and put their money in the company. When you get big investors coming in, after a while, the big investors start making the calls on how you run the company. And then they might say to the other 2 guys, the third guy, actually, we need a better CFO, for example.
Whoa.
Right? I've seen it happen. We need a better CFO. This guy, he's good up to this stage, but now we want to take it to the next level. We feel he's not qualified. So we are the big investor. We have a say in this. We think we want to replace him. He can remain as a shareholder, but not that role as CFO.
That sounds terrible.
And there have been startups where they go into Series E, D, whatever, where the CEO himself is asked to step aside because the investors then want to appoint a professional CEO and not the founder. Right? It's happened a lot. Yeah.
So it sounds like it's fairly common, these conflicts.
It happens. So I always, when I talk to founders, and I said, guys, this is a journey you're going to take. These are things which I've seen along the way. I'm just sharing with you. I hope good things happen to you, but you must be prepared for these things as well.
We've watched from movies, learned about the startup journey of, let's say, Facebook, WeWork, and all these conflicts and drama that goes on. But it seems like it's more prevalent than we think, especially maybe
It is,
among
yeah. I mean, Facebook is
startups.
a very stark example, right? Where Mark Zuckerberg basically took over and kicked out Eduardo Saverin.
Yes.
But Saverin made so much money, he's now his own investor.
Yes.
And when Saverin actually invested in one of my clients,
Oh.
and he put a lot of money in, but because he put so much money in, he felt he could call the shots.
Mm.
And he then said, I don't want to use this law firm. I think you should use a bigger US law firm. I think, and my clients, being small guys, said, Sivi, I'm so sorry, we have no choice. But he wants us to use a bigger US law firm and not a Singapore firm. So I lost the client. And this happens.
I see.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see the relationship between, investor, startup, and the lawyers,
Yeah.
and how that dynamic may change.
Correct.
Over time. When you advise startups, you kind of think about the not so great things that might happen. So, for example, what if there's a conflict? What if other players come into this and there might be a disagreement?
Yeah.
Do you think that lawyers have to be pessimistic because we kind of have to predict the worst outcomes and prepare our clients for it, and therefore that shapes our personality?
Our
I don't know.
personalities.
Would you think so?
Maybe not pessimistic, but we have to be cautious. Right. So a very famous thing which all lawyers tend to say when they ask a question by a client or a friend, we say it depends. Right. And why do we say it depends is because we are thinking about all the various factual scenarios, the qualifications, the assumptions, what could go wrong. So we need to be aware of these things, what could go wrong, and be able to express that to the client. But not in a pessimistic way. You tell the client, oh, you can't do this, it's going to be bad. I've come across cases where this hasn't failed or hasn't worked. You tell the client, okay, I think it's good what you're doing. There's hope or there's potential. I just want to remind you or alert you to these other things that could go wrong, which is fine. So I don't think we need to be pessimistic, but we need to be aware of the things that could go wrong, and that's how you advise your client. And that's why when you negotiate with the other side, you are looking to protect your client, right?
Yes.
Reduce liability, reduce it because, if this goes wrong, we could be sued, right? So you tell your client all these things. But I don't think it means you have to have a pessimistic character. In fact, you must always have an optimistic character, I think, whether you're a lawyer or in life.
So we've talked about your growing years, your path to becoming a lawyer, and your practice itself. Maybe now we can move on to something else. So I'm not sure if a lot of people know this about you, but you did mention that in your early years, you did volunteer for a suicide hotline. And I think that's really remarkable. Working on a suicide hotline is really tough. But coming out from that experience, how has that shaped how you view mental health?
So when I was in my second year of practice, my aunt was a volunteer at the Samaritans of Singapore. And I must thank her, she's my godmother as well. And she said, hey, you hotshot lawyer, you better come and do some volunteer work.
Yes.
Get your feet on the ground so that you know what actually happens on the ground and don't think. And I said, okay, I'll come. So
Humbling experience.
Yeah, so I joined the SOS. I actually go through a 9-month course to
Oh.
become a volunteer. And you go through this course because the SOS management want to make sure that you have a certain strong character, not as in stubborn, but rather to be able to handle calls from people who are in crisis, who are suicidal, who are troubled. Because sometimes if you are not prepared and you have something in the past which troubled you, it could come up.
Yes.
And then you get traumatized or you
Yes.
get affected. So you go through this 9-month course and they put you through different scenarios and all that. So anyway, I became a volunteer and I was handling phone calls, and listening to people who have usual problems, money problems, work problems, family problems, children who had issues with their teachers or school, but they were generally calls you take and they're generally okay. And maybe that's where I learned my listening skills as well. So you hear things, but then once in a while you get the serious one where after a while you realize there's a suicidal tendency, and then you got to know how to handle that, how to try and talk them. But the SOS principle also is that at the end of the day you can only do so much, especially if it's a phone call. if at the end of the day when that person terminates the call and you don't know whether you made a difference and that person may still have gone ahead, that's all you can do. Right? You must know how to cut and not get so emotionally involved in it that it affects you, you see. Hard to implement, easy to say, because sometimes you, after talking like 1-2 hours with that person, you kind of connect with that person. And then at the end of it, the person says, yeah, I know, thank you so much. I know I hurt you, but really I'm just so bad. I'm so down or whatever it is. I don't think anyone can help me. And then they put the phone down.
Wow.
And then you don't know what's going to happen because you don't use real names and everything, right? And that person may not tell you name. So then when you come back into practice and you hear all these clients complaining about this and your colleagues or your secretary saying, I am going to work here, I don't like that. Then you're like, but there's a lot more to life than this. There are people out there who are really in difficulties. You need to remember that and sometimes be in touch with the rest of Singapore.
Yep.
Even within the firm, when I deal with staff and lawyers, I'm sometimes able to sense if somebody is not doing the work properly or upset or something because there's something else behind it. And I make myself available if they want to talk about it. But if they don't want, that's fine as well. You can't force someone to tell you, oh, I'm having issues at home and blah, 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 whatever it is. But at least I know that there's something troubling them. And I don't then judge them because their work was bad and I say, oh, I'm going to fire you or whatever it is. That's not the way we should handle it.
I think that's very understanding. And the fact that you're able to sense, when someone might be struggling with other issues. It could be mental health, so on and so forth. And I think that's quite important, especially in a law firm, whereby, lawyers, when we do work, it could be very, one person, independent, isolating.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes people just don't notice. Maybe that's just one of the advice, which is, to look out for people around you in the firm who might not be doing so well.
So well, yeah. And that's why I think it's important to come to office. I mean, the work from home hybrid system is great. It has its wonderful advantages, but we should still find opportunities to come together and spend time in the office, even if it's 3-4 hours, so that you connect with people.
Yes.
And you don't feel so isolated, especially if you're going through a difficult time, crisis with the family, financially, health, mental. Have people around you and connect with them. People that you trust, people that you're friendly with and good terms with.
I think that's a good point because when we work from home, it's just us in the computer, right?
Yeah.
There's no one else around us. Whereas in office, that's that kind of people aspect, and you have interactions, and people do notice the differences.
That's right.
While it is true that we do earn like a decent salary, and there's a lot to be grateful for, but we did also talk about how it could be a stressful environment, with the fast pace of work these days.
Yeah.
So I guess that could increase the risk of mental health issues that our lawyers might have to deal with. So for that, what advice would you give to lawyers who might be struggling with that?
So like I said earlier, every occupation has an element of stress, right? That comes with the liability, the accountability, the responsibility. It's all there. Some may be more than others. So that's why it's important that you have other things to do outside your work, right? Whether it's your sports, your exercise, your family, your hobbies, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, you need people, you need to do things because they help you to de-stress, to cope better, and you must find the time. So it's a discipline as well. How we live our life, I guess it's also a discipline. Whether we want to just be slaves to work, it's your choice you make, it's not a good choice, or whether I will work hard, I will really want to do all this, but I also got to know where to de-stress, where to enjoy myself, have fun. I mean, some people have fun doing the work.
Yes.
Fine.
There are.
There are people who enjoy doing it. But if there are people who are working hard because they want to earn a lot of money, that's also fine, but that only goes so far. Because after all, if you feel you're not getting paid for all the harder work that you're doing, you get dissatisfied, right? You become disillusioned. But I always feel that if you have a balance with other things happening around your life, then you're a bit more stable and you cope better with the stress. Yeah, mental health is there, and I think we are probably, compared to the time I started practice, we are probably now more aware of mental health. People talk about it more openly. In when I first started, maybe not so much, and maybe a bit more of a stigma if you say, I think I've got mental issues, I'm not coping well. But I'm glad now it's out there in the open. People talk about it. It's more acceptable. Um, even the words used are a bit more careful. We don't say he's mad, he's crazy, whatever it is, or he's having mental challenges or issues, whatever it is. And there are more avenues of help as well, right? So even in our firm, we have, people on standby to help you to talk and all that kind of thing. So mental health is a reality, it is there, but it's how you want to handle it and how you cope with it. And it doesn't mean that if you are suffering from mental health that you are lousy or that you're going to fail or you're weak. No, it's just part and parcel of life, right? Whether you break your leg or fall sick with a flu or COVID, mental health is just another one of those.
I guess we would just like to wrap up with one final question.
Uh-huh.
If you had to give one piece of advice to the next generation of junior lawyers, what would you say to them to save them from your biggest mistake?
Well, I would say you're going to make mistakes, right? But don't feel that when you make a mistake is the end of the world, right? You're going to make mistakes, but learn from the mistakes. Try to improve yourself, understand why you made the mistake, and how you can do it better, right? And be positive, right? You must always be positive and want to improve yourself, want to do better at your work, and work as a team. You're never alone, right? That's I always feel very important. Don't think you are alone and nobody else is with you. And the people who are going to help you are your colleagues, your staff, your lawyers around you, and also your friends and your family. Everybody plays a role in how you, and you are also playing an important positive role in someone else's life, right? So it's very interconnected.
Well, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Most welcome. Thank you.
That's the end of our podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode.